I've never told anyone this until today. Because when you tell people you're afraid of your own house, not because of ghosts, but because of how a coffee cup is placed, they look at you with pity. They think you're losing your mind. Maybe they're right. But madness doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's carefully cultivated. Mine was grown within the walls of my own perfect home. My name is Liam. The first change happened on a Tuesday. I came home from work, tired to the bone, and put the kettle on. My house greeted me with silence and the smell of the lemon-scented cleaner my wife, Anna, used. I opened the cupboard to get my favorite mug, heavy, ceramic, dark blue. It always sat in the same spot, handle facing to the right. It was my own small, idiotic habit, a piece of my ordered world. But this time, it was facing left. I froze for a moment. It was nothing. Anna must have just put it away carelessly. I grabbed the mug, made my tea, and sat in the living room. But that little thing, that tiny glitch in the matrix of my home, lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. It was the first seed. I just didn't know yet that it would grow into a forest of nightmares.
The escalation of changes began a week later. One Saturday, I was looking for a book on the shelf. My books were always arranged alphabetically by author. That was my law, inviolable. But now, they were arranged by the color of their spines, from white to black, creating a neat gradient. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Anna," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you touch the books?" She came into the room, glanced at the shelf, and shrugged. "No, honey. Looks nice, though." She didn't get it. To her, it was just a change. To me, it was a violation. A few days later, I opened my closet. My dress shirts, which I always folded in a specific way, collar to collar, were now neatly rolled into tight cylinders, the way one does for travel. I had never in my life rolled a shirt. Paranoia began to take root. This could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Someone was getting into my house when we were gone. But they weren't stealing anything. They were improving, organizing. I was starting to feel like a guest in my own life, one that someone else was editing without my permission.
I got my physical proof when my obsession peaked. I started leaving traps, tiny, unnoticeable markers of my territory. I placed a long strand of Anna's hair across the door jamb of my office. I made a faint pencil mark on the kitchen window frame. I felt insane, but the need to know was stronger than the shame. One morning, after coming back from a run, I found the hair lying on the floor and the mark on the window neatly erased. The blood in my veins turned to ice. He'd been here. But the most terrifying thing was waiting for me in the kitchen. On the perfectly clean table sat a plate with a half-eaten slice of apple pie and a glass of milk. Neither I nor Anna had eaten pie that morning. I called her at work. She knew nothing about it. The horror was no longer abstract. It was physical. It had a taste and a smell. Someone wasn't just entering my house. They were eating here. They were living here, in the gaps of our lives. They were acting like they owned the place. The final improvement broke me completely. A month of this silent, psychological terror had passed. I had lost weight. I barely slept. Anna was living with a ghost. One evening, exhausted and defeated, I walked into our bedroom. Everything seemed normal. And then I saw it. On my nightstand, in the silver frame that had always held our wedding photo, there was a different picture. It was a photo of a complete stranger,
A man in his 40s with kind eyes and a calm smile, with his arm around my Anna. It was a professional photo, and they looked happy. My picture was gone. Tucked under the frame was a small note, written in a neat, elegant script. It contained only 5 words. Better this way, don't you think? I sat on the bed, holding the photo in my hands, and I understood. The person who broke into my home didn't want to hurt me. He didn't want to scare me. He wanted to replace me. He was methodically erasing me from my own life, and in his view, making it better. And looking at Anna's happy face in this stranger's photograph, the most terrifying thought pierced my mind. What if he's right?
The final improvement broke me completely. A month of this silent, psychological terror had passed. I had lost weight, I barely slept. Anna was living with a ghost. One evening, exhausted and defeated, I walked into our bedroom. Everything seemed normal. And then I saw it. On my nightstand, in the silver frame that had always held our wedding photo, there was a different picture. It was a photo of a complete stranger, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a calm smile, with his arm around my Anna. It was a professional photo, and they looked happy. My picture was gone. Tucked under the frame was a small note, written in a neat, elegant script. It contained only 5 words. Better this way, don't you think? I sat on the bed, holding the photo in my hands, and I understood. The person who broke into my home didn't want to hurt me. He didn't want to scare me. He wanted to replace me. He was methodically erasing me from my own life, and in his view, making it better. And looking at Anna's happy face in this stranger's photograph, the most terrifying thought pierced my mind. What if he's right?
What I'm about to tell you destroyed the silence in my home. Not with noise, but with what was hiding behind it. They say old houses have their own sounds, the creak of floorboards, the groan of pipes. But what happens when those sounds start to mimic you? When the house learns to speak with your family's voice? My name is Ben, and an echo moved into my attic. I heard the first sound late one night, around 2 a.m. I woke up to the sound of a baby crying through the monitor on my nightstand, a familiar sound for a new father. I quietly got up so as not to wake my wife and went to our 6-month-old son's room. But when I entered, I saw him sleeping soundly, his little chest rising and falling evenly. There was no crying. I stood there for a minute, puzzled, and went back to the bedroom. As soon as I lay down, the crying started again, but this time I listened more closely. The sound was thin, almost mechanical, and it wasn't coming from Sam's room. It seemed to be coming from directly above, from the attic that sat over the nursery. The sound was a perfect copy of my son's cry, but as if recorded on old, slightly stretched tape. Drafts, I whispered to myself. Old house, wind in the chimney. I tried to find a rational explanation, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider.
The mimicking of footsteps began a few days later, and I knew it wasn't the wind. I was home alone. Sam was napping upstairs, and my wife had gone to the store. I was walking through the living room on the first floor, talking on the phone, and that's when I heard it. A soft shuffling and the creak of floorboards in the attic, perfectly synchronized with my own steps. I stopped. The sound from above stopped too. I took 3 slow steps toward the kitchen. Thud, thud, thud. And from above, with a perfect half-second delay, came 3 soft creaks. Creak, creak, creak. The blood froze in my veins. I conducted an experiment. A quick step, a long pause, 2 short ones. And it, whatever it was, mirrored my every move. This wasn't a random sound. This was a conscious, precise reflection. It was listening. It was learning. I sat down on the couch, feeling like an insect under a microscope. My home, my fortress, had become a cage where I was the test subject. And something upstairs was studying me, like a scientist studying a rat in a maze.
I heard my wife's voice on a Friday. I remember that day to the second. I was working on my computer while she was out picking up an order. The house was completely silent, save for the clicking of my keyboard. And then, suddenly, from the second floor, from the hallway near the stairs, I clearly heard her voice call, "Ben!" It wasn't loud, just a calm question. I froze. The voice was identical. The timbre, the intonation, but it had a strange emptiness to it, a lack of resonance, as if it were being played through a cheap speaker. "Julie!" I yelled back, my heart pounding. Silence. In a panic, I ran through the whole house, every room, every closet. It was empty. I called her. She answered from her car, said she'd be home in 5 minutes. When she returned, I told her everything. About the steps, about her voice. She hugged me, looked at me with tired eyes, and said, "Ben, you're so sleep-deprived. You're just hearing things." And in that moment, I felt completely alone. It wasn't just mimicking my family. It was using that mimicry to isolate me, to make everyone, including myself, doubt my own sanity.
Checking the attic was my last rational act. I couldn't live in this auditory hell any longer. One day when Julie and Sam had gone to her parents' house, I grabbed the brightest flashlight I owned and a heavy metal fireplace poker. My hands were shaking as I pulled the cord that opened the attic hatch. A wave of stuffy heat and the thick smell of old wood and dust washed over me. I climbed the rickety ladder. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing cobweb-covered beams, old boxes, forgotten furniture under white sheets. I searched every inch. I knocked on the walls, checked the floorboards. The attic was completely empty. There were no animals, no birds, nothing that could be making these sounds. There were no signs that anyone had ever been up there. And that was the most terrifying discovery. If I had found a rat or even a squatter, it would have been a relief. But the emptiness meant the source wasn't physical. It didn't live in the attic. It was the attic. It was the walls, the floor, the very air. And there was no escaping it. I heard the new sound that same evening, and it was the final nail in the coffin of my peace of mind. I was sitting in the living room, defeated and empty. Julie was back, rocking a fussy Sam in her arms. I was watching them, this idyllic picture of domestic tranquility. And then from upstairs, from the attic, I heard it. A new sound, quiet and clear, a gentle, soothing lullaby, hummed in my wife's voice. The same timbre, the same melody she always sang to Sam. I snapped my head to look at her. Her lips were sealed. She was silent, just rocking our son. But the lullaby continued from above, perfectly clear, flawless. And I understood. What lived in our attic wasn't a monster. It was an echo of my family. A parasitic copy that was learning to be us. It wasn't hostile. It just wanted to be like us. And looking at my real wife, I thought with a surge of horror, what happens when the echo decides it can do a better job than the original?
Sometimes reality gets a hairline fracture, I know because I fell into one. It doesn't look like a hole in the ground. It looks like a normal photograph taken in my new house with something in the background that wasn't supposed to be there. My name is Ethan, and someone from my home's past has decided that my family now belongs to him. I noticed the first anomaly in a photo by accident. We had moved into an old but charming Victorian house 3 months prior. We were celebrating our son, Max's 5th birthday. I took hundreds of pictures. A few days later, reviewing them on my computer, I paused on one. Max was blowing out his candles. Everyone was laughing. But in the background, in the reflection of the dark living room window, I saw something strange. There was a faint, blurry figure of a man. He was wearing an old-fashioned suit, and his expression was serious. I zoomed in. The quality was poor, but he was definitely there. I called my wife, Claire, over. "It's probably just a reflection from the lamp, or someone walking by on the street," she said. It was the most logical explanation. I agreed and deleted the photo, feeling a slight, irrational discomfort.
The pattern in past photos made me realize it wasn't a reflection. That image was stuck in my head. One night, when everyone was asleep, I sat down at my computer and started going through our entire family archive from the moment we moved in. I felt like a detective investigating a crime that hadn't happened yet, and I found him, again. In a photo from our first barbecue in the backyard, he was standing far off by the old oak tree, barely visible. In another, where Claire was planting flowers, his silhouette was in the second-story window. He was in 5 different photos, taken at different times and in different parts of the house. Always in the background, always slightly out of focus. But there was something that made my blood run cold. I laid the photos out in chronological order. With each subsequent picture, the figure was a little bit closer, a little bit clearer. And in the last photo, taken just a week ago, of Max playing on the floor, he was standing in the hallway doorway, and I could just make out his eyes. He was looking directly at the camera, directly at me.
The digital imprint proved to me I wasn't going crazy. By now, I was obsessed. I had to understand what this was. A ghost? A camera glitch? I decided to run an experiment. One day, when the lighting in the house was perfect, I took my camera and snapped the picture of the completely empty wall in the hallway where I had last seen him. On the camera's small screen, the wall was just a wall. I uploaded the photo to my computer. At first glance, nothing. But then, I did what photo editors do. I started playing with the settings. I cranked the contrast to the maximum, altered the brightness levels, and then it emerged. Faintly, like a watermark on paper, the face of the same man materialized in the texture of the wallpaper. I could see him clearly now. He was in his 40s, with sad, deep-set eyes, a thin mustache, and an expression of infinite sorrow on his face. He wasn't in the photo, he was of the photo. He was part of the house, a digital ghost that only the camera's sensor could perceive.
The discovery in the basement revealed his story and his intent. I needed to know who he was. I started looking for old records of the house, hoping to find the names of previous owners. In the damp, dark cellar, behind an old boiler, I stumbled upon a hidden wooden chest. Inside, among yellowed letters, was an old photo album. I opened it with trembling hands, and I saw him. It was the same man from my photographs. The album told the story of his life in this house in the 1930s. Here he was, happy, with his young wife. Here they were with 2 small children. They were laughing, playing in the same yard, sitting in the same living room. But as I flipped through the album, I noticed a terrifying change. People started disappearing from the subsequent photos. First one child, then the second, then his wife. The last pages of the album contained only pictures of a solitary man in an empty house, his face growing more and more grief-stricken. The final photo was a self-portrait in a mirror, his eyes filled with an unspeakable pain. He had lost everything within these walls.
The invasion was completed last night. I was sitting in my office trying to process what I'd found when Claire called me from the living room. "Ethan, look what a cute picture I just got," she said. I came downstairs. She handed me her phone. On the screen was a picture of our son, Max, sitting on the rug and laughing as he built a tower of blocks. I looked at the photo and my heart stopped. The figure of the man was no longer a blurry shadow in the background. He was kneeling next to Max, perfectly clear, though slightly transparent. His translucent hand was resting on my son's shoulder, and he was looking at the camera with a sad, longing smile. Max, in the photo, was laughing, oblivious, happy. And I understood everything. He wasn't evil. He didn't want to scare us. He's just lonely. He lost his family in this house, and now he's found a new one. He started with my son, and I don't know how to fight a ghost who wants nothing but love.